They want to be on the active side. Active investors. That means you want to do the heavy lifting, y'all. Just remember that. You chose that.
Yo, what is up, everybody? My name is Matt Drouin. I'm the host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors Podcast, the show to listen to if you are a residential real estate investor that maybe owns a couple properties and is banging their head against the wall, figuring out how the heck am I going to reach financial goals like financial independence and kids' college educations and all that stuff, and mystified as to what it takes to graduate and swim upstream into commercial real estate. And at the end of the day, it's hard, but it's not that hard. So I brought on a really special guest today, Ms. Julie Holly, our real estate syndicator, third generation in real estate. Julie helps others activate both their financial and personal potential. While she's not speaking at events across the country, throughout the year, she enjoys mountain biking and spending time with her family at her North Idaho home. Julie launched her podcast in May 2nd, 2020. The Conscious Investor, definitely check that out. She's like 500 episodes deep and features a Monday mindset episode to help reach your week with intention, and delivers weekly conversations with real estate investing experts focused on their mindset. Julie is actually a very, very special guest of mine because my wife is actually an educator. She's a former educator until the governor, Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger, gave her a leg up in terms of launching into her own real estate journey. So, Julie, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. That's funny because that just reminds me of something that has to do with my real estate adventure. So we can touch on that. During this episode, it'll come up.
Excellent. All right. So you were born, now you're here. What happened in between?
In between, a lot of life has happened in between, and it's beautiful. But here's the common thread is that ultimately I've discovered that I just help fulfill wishes for people. So like your wife, I used to be an educator, and then I went into real estate sales, and then I went back to education, and then I went into, investing in single family. The common thread amongst all of these things is I want to help people. And so it didn't matter what I was doing as long as I was helping and supporting people. So as a teacher, hey, I'm helping and supporting kids. It's a beautiful thing. In real estate sales, I'm supporting people buying their first or next home. If I'm buying rental properties, I'm supporting residents because I get to provide that quality housing for them, right? And so every single thing I've done, and I only recently discovered this, so it's kind of fun, it's all the heart. So if I look at the focal point of my entire existence from birth till now, it's all been focused on how do I help and support people in closing that gap between where they are now and that wish. Because a wish is something that's difficult to attain. It's not easily attainable, but that also means that it is attainable. And so I love just supporting people in finding that, being able to close that gap, fulfill those wishes, because the people I support, they do really cool things in the world. So I love it.
Let's talk about, you started in residential real estate investing with the help of Mr. Arnold, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. So tell us about that story, because that's absolutely crazy. He's an absolute idol of mine, and maybe wish we could amend the Constitution so he could run for president at some point in time. But I know that's not going to happen. So tell me about that story, because that's absolutely was mind blowing when I heard that.
Yeah, right. It is crazy. So I was a very young teacher. I started teaching when I was 22, and I distinctly remember, in my mid 20s when Arnold became governor. I'm happy to say I voted for him. He did a phenomenal job. I couldn't believe what he was able to accomplish so quickly. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. One of the things that he did do, which you guys experienced, was he gave compensation for teachers when the test scores went up, and teachers aren't always super well compensated. And I happened to be the recipient of $10,000. So when you're making $29,000 as a teacher, and all of a sudden you have this check, that allowed me to buy my very first house. That was literally the down payment for my first house. And that opened the entire gateway. My dad had told me, he's like, Hey, sugar, you gotta get on that equity elevator or escalator. That's what and he would always try to explain it. And I had the hardest time understanding equity and everything. And, once you get it, you get it. But, yes, Dad, going to buy a house, bought a house. There's a lot more to that story, but I'll keep it simple. And in that process, I realized I am on a teacher's salary, and this doesn't leave me much discretionary in cash to go and enjoy life, even a little bit. So I started house hacking, and that house hacking process did not have that name back then. So thank you, Bigger Pockets community, for creating that phrase. It helped me understand myself better. So I rented out a room in my house. That was great. And then ultimately, when my husband and I got married, we had a discovery. We had a very firm belief that we wanted to help people with their housing. I had found myself in a really compromised situation in my early adulthood, and it was difficult to find housing, and I needed to find housing for my own safety. And in that process, I discovered that even I looked good on paper, but I had dogs. And so it was like, wow, finding a rental is actually very challenging, and it can be challenging. But if we are the landlords, we could be building up a rental portfolio that's going to help us in the long run. And we could rent out if we feel guided. We can rent out to whoever we want to rent out to. So we really like that. Again, going back to helping is how can we select those residents and provide the housing that they need that they may not be able to get somewhere else.
Well, Julie, that's absolutely beautiful. I mean, part of the core mission of our company, I mean, we don't, we aren't a for-profit company, not a not-for-profit company, but we do have a core mission of creating positive social impact in our community of Rochester, New York. I mean, we have really a tale of two cities that exists in our community, where you have really, really wealthy areas, and you have like areas that are just like brutalized by abject poverty. And I think that, there are residents of ours that, are just on the cusp, that are living in bad areas, that have good, have good jobs, good sources of income, but just need somebody to give them a hand up. And one thing has actually made our company a lot more money, because those residents stay with us. They're not like the 20, 30 something, college graduates that, move every 2 years for a job and that sort of thing. So I absolutely love that. So getting on like graduating, to commercial, I mean, what was sort of the seminal moment that happened when you were like, geez, we got to scale this thing up?
Well, what happened is we had a couple of children. I don't know if any of you listeners can relate to this, but when you have kids, you have a different perspective in life. And I started to feel very vulnerable, very uncomfortable with the 1-to-1 ratio of our single family. And so it was like, yeah, I can self-manage these. I self-manage from across the country, like that's okay. But at the same time, if somebody doesn't make their payment, or if they move, our family is on the hook. And yes, we always had, reserves. However, it just made me feel really uncomfortable. And so my husband is phenomenal. And he said, well, why don't you just start doing some research and see if there's another way within real estate that, might be more advantageous. And so I did what many people do. I went to, this is years ago, and Bigger Pockets was really like the hub. There weren't podcasts like Matt's and so many others on this topic. And so I was listening to Bigger Pockets, and I remember listening to the very first woman, who's a friend, Monique Halm, and she was talking about, that's where I heard house hacking. I'm like, oh, that's what I did. And then in the same conversation, she just shared what syndication was and how she started syndicating. And my mind was absolutely blown, because remember, my heart is to help and serve all people. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I can help my family. I can help investors. I can help residents still. I can help communities. The scale, the magnitude of it was absolutely overwhelming. And every time I tell the story, I literally get all of the feelings. I can visualize the entire experience because it was so profound. And that's when I literally shifted everything and started, I was singularly focused on syndication.
So, Julia, how did you actually start that process? I mean, did you just listen to this podcast and you were just like, oh, I know everything I need to know to start this journey? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a really, I mean, education as a educator. So I listened to a lot of podcasts. I bought Michael Blanc's book, which I still think is one of the easiest, best books for everyone. It's so accessible. It's so easy to simply say, I was on summer vacation and it was like checklist. I'm doing all of these things. This is what Michael Blanc says, right? And he was one of the rare people with a very credible podcast at the time. I missed Dealmaker Live, and I was disappointed. My husband wasn't quite fully convinced that I was completely committed. And honestly, I don't know that I was either. And it's an investment when you go to events. But as soon as that event came and went, that was like the light switch where I realized, oh no, I mean, I had already established an LLC and everything, but I knew I was all in on the syndication route. And so we went to a real estate guys event that fall because that was the next event. And I followed Michael Blanc very, very carefully, very meticulously. And I'm like, well, he says that this is a good event. I mean, we're going to go to that event. So we went to Secrets of Successful Syndication. And it was a powerful event because it really did break down the entire process step by step. Probably in one of the best ways. I've been to a lot of events. I've spoken at a lot of events over the years now, and that still was probably one of the best ones I've been to as a new syndicator. At this point, there are so many great ones to choose from, though. But the interesting thing is that I knew that being someone who wanted to help serve and support others, I knew I really wanted to go into the capital raising, investor relations. Like that was the lane I wanted to be in. And so I believed with my heart and soul that if I wanted to go in that lane, then I needed to do every single thing that I would expect my limited partners to do. So we invested passively. We rolled funds into self-directed funds. We opened infinite banking accounts. Like we've just done a lot of different things. And that was my lead in to syndicating. It started on the passive side. It started with having my own personal experiences because it's really, in my opinion, it's really important to understand the process and what I'm expecting my investors to do. It's a substantial amount of trust when you're wiring money and you've heard this person on podcasts and you believe them and you feel like, oh, I believe I can trust this person. But when you are wiring a chunk of money to some account, and if that wire doesn't land correctly, like, oh, well, so sorry, right? Like it's a big deal. And so I think that understanding all of those emotions, I knew and I valued that was an important part of my own syndication journey. And then I have a lot more to say for people who want to transition, but that was my personal journey.
Yeah, that is so money because a lot of people, it's like you passively invest and then you don't hear from the sponsor for like 8 months after you wired them like $50,000 to $100,000. So that's like the first thing is like, hey, I would have appreciated like getting like a monthly update, even if there wasn't any news, like in like that type of thing. And I think that, Vince Lombardi once said like leadership by example is the only way to lead. And it's so true. And I've also done every single way that our investment partners have participated in our opportunities. Like I've done the same thing, right? So, I in the discovery process is like, you don't have to have all of your stuff in cash. Like there's also things like, do you have like a brokerage account? There's a, S blocks, securities-based line of credit. Like how could I expect one of my investment partners to use that as a tool to participate in one of our offerings if I haven't done it myself? And I understood that and actually had that lived experience. So let's fast forward a little bit. You got educated. What were the next steps for you? Were you out there looking for deals? Were you out there, raising capital? Kind of like, tell me about the journey for that first like larger deal, or was big for you at the time?
It was a lot of no's. So I am super meticulous about the people that I align myself with. And one thing that's critical for anyone to understand is that your reputation is directly tied and correlated to whoever you are partnered with. And if they do something that's shady or isn't something that you want reflected on yourself or a brand that you're developing, then you need to think twice about that partnership. And so I spent a massive amount of time networking. I also spent a lot of money at the time. Like masterminds have actually gone up since this point, but we dropped like 20 grand, and I'm saying that number specifically because I had we almost joined one program and they were like 35,000, and my husband and I looked at each other, we're like, holy cow. and then we started comparing different programs that mentorship programs and masterminds that we were drawn to, and so that was part of our investment capital. That was the best $20,000 investment I've ever made in my life. I'm still part of that group. But surrounding myself with like-minded people, surrounding myself with a mentor who is still less of a mentor and more of a very good friend and a business partner all these years later, just such a phenomenal human. And you develop this network, you develop that connection, that cohesiveness. I was invited into a lot of deal opportunities. I would review them myself. I'd show them to my mentor. If I thought they were a good deal, then I didn't just jump in. Like, okay, I like the people. I believe in who they are. I believe they operate with integrity and strong values and virtues. So then I'd show it to my mentor. We'd go through it. And, sometimes you'd be like, yeah, you can. But my intuition told me like, no, don't do that one. And so it was really, really painful, honestly, leading into my first deal, because it was a whole lot of no's before I had a yes. And that first deal came. This is going to sound like a super long time, but when I think about filing my LLC and actually closing as a co-GP on my first syndication, that was a 2-year window of time. So it's like taking my own personal journey. I view that as part of the entire process, taking time to develop a network and not just have relationships that are superficial. Like, don't just go and do business. Don't go into a deal with somebody that you just met. Now, as a passive investor, I might do that because I can vet people in a different way with my own funds. But if I'm going into partnership as co-GPs on something, that's a completely different story. To me, those relationships take time to incubate and to process. You want to see how people act and respond. And I like to co-create content with people, and I like to get to know them. I like to see them at events and see how they carry and conduct themselves. So it was a very, very long time, but it was a great deal, and I knew it. And so it was easy to go in, share that deal and invite the passive investors that I had, brought into my ecosystem. It was a very easy thing because I believed in the team. I believed that we would execute in a strong way, and I believed completely in the deal. So I'm like, this is a beautiful situation. I didn't even kiss any of the frogs. I just got this beautiful, investment opportunity, because I was patient. And so I think that's really, it's really challenging when you're early on in your investing and you just I just want that first deal, and everybody says I can get it in 90 days. And, it's like, well, if you were wearing a hat like me as investor relations, it might take a little bit longer. because I'm not going out there acquiring the property. I'm not making the broker relationships. I'm not wearing that hat. And so my process looked a lot different. If I was on acquisitions, I could have gone and, found some smaller 20 unit type things, but I started, the investment portfolio with a 120 unit apartment complex.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some things to highlight there based upon what you said on the actual people themselves. Like, yeah, the jockey over the horse. It's I covered this a little bit, and I just want to harp on it in that, I don't know, I said last week contracts don't matter. And I got a lot of backlash for that. And my meaning behind that was, if you don't feel good about the person you're doing business with, then contracts just aren't going to matter at all. If things go sideways. So feeling good about the person first, yes, having a contract and things in writing, just so we don't forget about commitments that we may have made, like at a granular level. So, but I absolutely love that. So your focus was on the capital side or the money provider side of the deal. What was your methodology for like building your network before you even had an opportunity? Because there's this like really, I don't know, sinister mantra out there that, find the deal and the money will come. And I think it's complete garbage and false. I think the money comes first. So you're coming with that. So tell me about that, like process, your methodology and sequencing, and like specifically what you did from a tactical standpoint to really build that network out while you were, reviewing operators and sponsors along this journey.
That was such a polite and delicate way of phrasing that. You're very couth. I appreciate that. I don't think I would have been as kind. I'm going to answer the question. I want to go back also and say a lot, like some of those deals I said no to in the last year and a half have been hurting. So I want to encourage you, listener, that in your process, trust your intuition, because you will see in time. And that's the only thing that's going to help you is time. But I can see in time that almost every deal that I said no to did not perform the way it was projected to perform. And so trust that intuition. As per methodology for building a network, I love people. It's ridiculous how much I love people. And I love seeing people find success. And I love helping people in a really big way. So my methodology has always been, start with serving. A lot of times when I will speak with a new investor, we talk about life because it's a partnership. And so it does take time. I spend more time than I believe an average capital raiser, person will. And that's because I really want to understand what that investor's needs are. So tactically, I was involved in every Facebook group known to man. I was cross-posting, just FYI. I used that as a strategy to kind of help me with my time because I was still a school teacher. And so I would cross-post amongst different real estate investing groups, my personal page on Facebook, and then I found LinkedIn, and I was like, what is this magical place? It has changed a lot over the years, but it is still such a powerful platform to be able to connect with people who really want to be educated. They really want to know, they want to understand. And so what one of my mentors would say, I networked my butt off. I attended events on a regular basis. And I think it's critical that if you're involved in any real estate in any capacity, you definitely need to be going to events, especially if you are taking care, if you're the money person, you need to be connecting with different people. Does that mean you have to go to real estate events? That's where things have shifted for me. I've actually been going to a lot of events that are complementary to real estate at this point. And well, who would want to invest, and what kind of events are they going to? And let me go to those events and let me get to know that group of people. So now I have these two separate pockets where I might go to a real estate event because I'm speaking at that event, or because I want to connect up with people within the real estate industry. I might go, like I went and saw Ryan Holiday and Robert Greene speak, right? It sounds funny to think that that's where, my particular avatar gravitates towards things like that. And so, finding opportunities to connect and make relationships with people was really important to me.
Julie, let's get a slick trick here, all right, from you and what you use. I mean, yes, taking an interest in somebody, I think that maybe our, slightly socially awkward people like myself have a hard time with that. But, let's just say that, like, okay, take an interest in somebody. Okay, where does it go from there, specifically? Because that's one thing is, like, I don't know, like, when should I, like, pop the question, so to speak? It is like, like, it kind of like, what's your tactical standpoint on that?
I think all of it comes up so organically, right? So if somebody is on my calendar specifically because they're on a discovery call and we want to explore investing, that's a very clear demarcation. If it's just in conversation with someone that I'm just meeting at in a non-real estate setting, you can usually sense, like, oh, wow, this would definitely benefit the person. And then you just ask, like, have you ever considered investing, in as a passive investor? Most people don't hear those terms or understand those terms. And so, like, it can just be a fun part of a natural conversation. It comes up very organically in the conversation. It's almost like my faith. It's such a part of who I am, the fabric, that it would be awkward if in a conversation, my faith, real estate, or the best book that you should read today did not come up. And so when you're in the right zone, if you're in the real estate setting, right, and you love it and you're sold out on it, it would be awkward if you didn't bring it up to the person, right? So to me, that just is very much a normal situation. I also have a weekly newsletter. And so when people come into my ecosystem, my newsletter actually isn't centered on real estate. The Conscious Investor newsletter talks about health, mindset, wealth, and I have links to podcast episodes and such. So it's a very soft approach, just to keep people. It allows people to get to know me as who I am. And this is important to the type of investor that I attract. This is something that appeals to them. They're like, oh, I get to see you. You are consistent. You show up consistently. Here's your philosophy and the way that you think about things. And I can see that. And so then when in those newsletters, there is a call to action of, the opportunity to, if you want to invest passively, there's beautiful phrasing for it, in the newsletter, but it gives an opportunity. So it's not screaming. And most people don't need to be screamed at, they just need the opportunity there and time to incubate and get to know you.
Yeah, I mean, a phrase that rings in my head a lot is relationships move the speed of trust. And kind of like what you're talking about is actually very similar to my thing, is that I kind of call it like social blockchain, that you have content out there that comes from the standpoint of wanting to help, either entertain, educate, or inspire. You see people belly to belly out at events that you're connected with that see your stuff. So they feel like they're like hanging out with you in the time period. And then also you're, delivering between you meet, because you may only see people face to face like a couple times a year, maybe once a year, but that way to keep like top of mind and somebody who would look forward to receiving a phone call from you. That is like that's just like my foundation for the platform that I've built for myself. So, so let's talk a little bit about, okay, so you got this deal after, two, like, would seem like excruciating years of just, opportunity after opportunity you said no to. You found this thing. Take me from there in terms of how you brought this thing to the finish line, and maybe some battle scars that you maybe have like earned in the process of doing that, and bringing that thing full circle.
I cried. I cried more than once, by the way, because I would see other people that, entered the space in a sense in a similar cohort as me. And I'm like, look at them go. And guess what? Yeah, not all of those deals have worked out and people have been foreclosed on, and all of that's real. So, really sticking to knowing your investment philosophy and your principles is so critical, and being unwilling, knowing what you will be unwavering on is paramount. You have to know what your foundations are. So that was worthwhile. Yeah. every deal is every deal invites a new opportunity, and it's really underestimated how challenging it is to raise capital. A lot of times it's kind of like, oh, that's so easy, you just go get the money. And it's like, it takes an exorbitant amount of trust, and it takes time to incubate those relationships. And I know that some people do believe they can expedite that process, but good business doesn't have to be pressed. And obviously I'm a patient person, which my family might disagree with, by the way. But in that process, I've also been dedicated to only presenting deals that I completely believe in. And so I do, 1 to 2 deals a year. I'm not out here, and I'm here. I'm saying this because I want to normalize some things. A lot of times we see people out on social platforms, and we see people spouting off unit counts and such, and they forget to say that they're fractional owners. And so it's like, can we please be honest? I would rather do 1 or 2 solid deals with solid partnerships than to do 5 or 6 deals and have a headache on my hand. Could you imagine 3 to 5 deals over time, over 5 years? That's a lot of deals. And if they're all headaches, there isn't a way to be able to navigate that successfully, and keep your sanity. So I've gone at a very slow and steady pace. We have actually gone full cycle on my first deal. So that's always it's exciting when you go full cycle. I've also acquired, have a partnership. I have 2 partnerships at this point that I'm deeply committed to. We're in multiple deals together. We work really well together. We have the same philosophy. And so instead of going broad and shallow, I'm going deeper into these partnerships, and there's a strong payout for that. Your investors, I have a lot of repeat investors. They know what to expect. They value the returns that they're receiving. And at this point, I'm focused on multifamily and assisted living. And so I know people might come to me with, oh, I got this self-storage deal. I've got this, light industrial. Everybody has something. Okay. Like, there are plenty of shiny objects out there. But I know exactly what I want to invest in. Going back to, how do I help people? I don't get lit up helping people store their junk. Like, maybe you just need to part ways with that. Like, let's just maybe consider that for a moment. And so self-storage does not light me up. I don't feel like it's helping people. I know it is in some cases, I get it, but in general, it's just not my thing. And so I know by investing in the multifamily and assisted living, I believe I'm making a very big impact in lives. And I love that. And I love those partnerships. I'm also involved in a ground up construction project. We are 2 years into that project, and that's been a really exciting project. Again, fabulous partners, great team, and new development is its own separate beast. I would like to develop down the road on my own. And so this is just a great opportunity to be able to learn the ropes with the safety net of having a strong general partnership team.
100%. So going back a little bit, so the 120 unit deal, how much did you have to raise for that as your responsibility as co-GP?
My very nominal. My personal, commitment was 500,000, which is like honestly a very normal for someone going into their first raise. And full transparency, I didn't make it, and so I had to learn how to say, this is where I'm at. But I communicated. One of the things that I have always done well is I was honest and I communicated along the way. So it wasn't a matter of surprise, we don't have this money. It was a, hey, this is where I'm at, and this is where I actually think I'm going to land. So I think I landed at like 385, right? And so it's really important to be able to just track all of that and just to understand. I thought I would be able to bring a lot more to the table. And let me just say, most people believe that they're going to bring a lot more to the table. And then they actually get into the raise, such as myself. And I'm like, whoa, this is really hard. It did become easier though, as with subsequent raises, it became a lot easier. And I was surprised on my first assisted living acquisition. It was, humbly I say, it was like reaching that 2 million mark felt effortless. And so, as you grow your reputation and you grow your relationships with, limited partners, it becomes easier with time.
Absolutely. So, maybe there was some things you could have done differently looking back in hindsight, but what did you do specifically? Was this like you were building all these relationships with potential investment partners, and then what was the first action point? Did you send out an email? Hey, I like this deal. This is the reason why I like it. Blah, 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 blah. Was there a phone call that was involved with that? Kind of like telling me like the sequencing and because 385, that's a very specific number, by the way, is actually, that's an impressive number to do on your first go around. So tell me about that people can pull out from some like actionable type of stuff that they can do if they're in the midst of it.
Well, let me just give a broad brush at, maybe even capital raising is one, you must absolutely be communicating with your limited partners on an ongoing basis. Like you can't just simply say, oh, I met you and we had this, if you're a 506B and, offering, oh, we have that pre-existing substantive relationship, check the box type thing. Actually, you need to keep the conversation going. There has to be some type of ongoing relationship, and you should want that. And so you need to be nurturing that relationship all the time along the way. I like to do that via email. As investors come to mind, I send them personal messages. I like my investors. They're cool people. So I would also recommend, hey, if you have investors that you value, it's fun. It's so much fun. I did a private investor lunch at my growth summit last year, and it was so much fun. That's beside the point from what you asked. But take note on that for your future raises, those of you who are listening. I love to send out text messages. A lot of times I will know and I'll have in my mind, I think this person would benefit from this. And so I have found and this is not efficient. And so I am in the process of shifting how I do things. But I have found personal connection, personal outreach is the single most impactful thing you can do in raising capital. So it differentiates you from everyone else who just sends out the text message, via some type of program that just does it, or the email. I have never had success with sending out the email blast. I know people do all the time. I know, I hear the stories. I have friends and they'll say like, yeah, I just send out the email and people sign up. So I definitely, that is something I am currently learning more about. But I have found that my investors respond very much to if I give a quick phone call, if I send a text message, it's very powerful. Yes, I always send out the emails because now you have something, hey, you can check in your inbox, it's already there.
Mm-hmm. These are the breadcrumbs and the clues is mastering the tedious.
Yeah, right.
All right, Julie, you've been very generous with your time. I know there's a lot more to tell about the story, but I wanted to pull out like what your zone of genius it was, and it continues to be and growing in this business. But to conclude, speaking to the people that are in our audience of, they own a couple investment properties, like what is your advice on like what they could do today, this week, this month to position themselves into scaling into larger commercial real estate deals?
And we're talking about active investors. They want to be on the active side. Active investors. That means you want to do the heavy lifting, y'all. Just remember that. You chose that. You talk to Matt and I, and you don't have to do the heavy lifting. So maybe start there. I actually do a presentation. I've done this at local meetups, and that is that you are so close. You are already doing everything that we do as commercial real estate investors. You're already doing that. And so I think understanding that and shifting, just toggle the switch in your mind. And I'll put it briefly like this. You already develop relationships with real estate agents. You just shift to developing relationships with brokers. You already have a geographic area that you invest in, so you understand how that works. You already know how to negotiate a contract. There's no difference, except on the commercial side, we're going to involve attorneys. No big deal. And it's not a big deal. It's just an attorney. If you need a reference, Matt and I both have one. I guarantee it. And so you're already doing these things. You already know how to go through inspections. You already know how to evaluate if the numbers make sense. It's really not that different. And so that's what I would say, take that to heart, listener, is that you really are doing all the exact same things that we do on the commercial real estate side. You're just doing it in the onesies, twosies. And it's so much fun when you do it at scale. And once you are willing to just take that step and say, wait, I'm already doing this, I could go into something far bigger. And those commercial loans, they're not very scary. You can go and get a commercial loan. And sometimes it's even easier than getting a traditional residential loan.
No, 100%. So Julie's advice is beast mode on.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for being on the show. How do our listeners get in touch with you? Are there any, raises right now that you can talk about currently that you'd like to bring a highlight to, or tell me about that?
Ooh, thank you so much. Actually, our development project is going into phase 2. We're going to be going vertical. So if you're listening and you want to be part of a ground up development project, it is a very strong deal. The returns are phenomenal. And owning the land, being able to buy things outright, how we've gone about it has been very strategic, and it's positioned investors for a very strong investment opportunity. The best way to reach me would be send me an email. You can send an email to julie@julieholly.com. So it's super easy, first and last name. And it's somewhere in the show for all the spelling and everything. And then if you don't mind, I have a conscious investor booklet. And this is very different than a lot of things that you're going to read. And I think a lot of times we tend to think that we're investing for the money, for the financial element of it. And there are so many other pieces that are important. And so that's where the conscious investor comes in, the podcast included. But if you text my cell number, then I will send you the Conscious Investor Beyond Financial Freedom booklet, and it will come directly to you. And you can text the word freedom, because I love freedom. You can text freedom to 208 944 1836.
Excellent, Julia. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well. I think we could put a phone number in the show notes. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't mind. You can put the phone number.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds good. Julia, thank you very much for being on the show, and look forward to seeing you in the green room.
Yeah, thank you.